So welcome to the first of the 2026 series in business leadership, brought to you by Eastern Washington University. Very happy that you're here. I think you're going to be very happy that you came once the evening is over. I just wanted to lay out the goal of these talks, and my apologies to people who have heard this before, but I think it's good to keep in mind that we're here, first of all, to listen to people who have been very successful in their careers, largely in business, find out what they do, and then in particular, find out how they got to where they are today. I hope that you'll be inspired by these stories that you're going to hear from our speaker tonight. And I think for those of you who've come before, I think there's been some inspiration. And your husband's up here. And then last but not least, we want you to have a little bit of fun. And so at the end of the session, you have a chance to raise your hand and ask questions, and then ask questions further in a less formal setting where there's going to be mingling over food and drink. So you've heard about the business cards. We're going to talk about those at the end of the session, so I hope some of you have taken upon yourself to create them. I just also, before we launch into the program, just want to let you know, if you haven't seen on the advertisement for this, that we do have a couple supporters out there, both credit unions, Boeing Employee Credit Union tonight, and Washington State Employee Credit Union as well. So anybody from those credit unions here? I don't think, I was told they're not going to come, but my thanks from afar. So before we hear from David Condon, I'd like you to hear from our president, Dr. Sheri McMahan, talking a bit about Eastern Washington University in March of 2026. So President McMahan, please join me.
Thank you. It is so great to see so many of you. Let me just say, it is finals next week. So yes, we just keep going, rolling through the year, each quarter. Again, to our community members, our faculty, our staff, thank you so much for being here. I'd also like to thank our School of Business and Institute for Public Policy and Economic Analysis for organizing this speaker series. We find this speaker series so valuable for all of us, but in particular our students who get to learn from these leaders, the good things that created their success, but maybe also the not so good things where they've learned from their experiences. So it becomes quite critical to learning through this. As many of you know, Eastern is the region's polytechnic, and we focus on preparing students for meaningful careers through applied learning. That is our focus. Throughout their time at Eastern, our students can either do internships or research or practicals or clinicals or performances of some sort to make their experience real life, right? Attribute it to their well-being. And we continue to see some strong momentum around this area, and that commitment is one of the reasons I am especially pleased to hear from David Condon tonight. While many of you know David through his service as mayor squared of Spokane, or his work through Premera, I've come to know him best as a champion for Eastern Washington University. He understands the role institutions like ours play in driving innovation, workforce development, and regional prosperity. He was an early believer in our polytechnic vision, and he is quick to show support for the Eastern in the community. And he is a steadfast supporter of our students and our mission to be the most affordable institution in the state of Washington. Yeah, let's give us a hand for that. And I am so grateful he can join us today, and I would like Patrick to come right back up and give David the proper introduction, as a mayor squared should have. Thank you, Patrick. Good, thanks.
Thank you. Oh, I could tell stories, but no, we won't do that with David Condon. I think you've seen from the advertisement for the event that he's the Vice President for Marketing for Washington State for Premera, which is a very significant healthcare insurer in our state. And while the headquarters of the company is really on the west side, David is based here, in fact, just down the road here on East Sprague. And we're very happy that he didn't have to move out of Spokane to do what he's doing. David's been in this role at Premera for about 6 years, and before that you heard from Dr. McMahan that he was mayor of Spokane, which most of you know, but maybe you don't know that he was the first two-term mayor since the 1970s. And he broke the curse, as we say in City Hall, that he would be reelected. Before he became engaged in politics, he was known as Captain Condon, where he served in the U.S. Army for 8 years in healthcare. So he doesn't come by the job at Premera just by chance, but he's returning, in a sense, to his roots. David is a graduate of Boston College, and before Boston College, a proud graduate of Gonzaga Prep. So would you please give David a warm Eagle welcome to a talk on what he now thinks is the landscape of healthcare and healthcare insurance. So, Mr. Condon, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, it's good to be here. Tonight, I'm going to kind of spend, as I've gone to, I think, 2 of these now, and it is very true. When I was mayor, I said Eastern was Spokane's university, and I probably took a little flack from the mayor of Cheney when I used to say that, but I fundamentally believe that I could look at any kid in Spokane or person in Spokane and say, you can go to Eastern and get a great degree. And quite frankly, I was surrounded by Eagles. Much of my cabinet were Eagle graduates. And if you're down in City Hall, many of the senior managers are there because of different reasons, whether it be the public policy or whether it be the masters in public administration and all the above. And so to me, it truly is Spokane's university, and to see that be such a big part of the university district, I think, is so critical. So, but tonight I wanted to it's kind of 3 tranches tonight. One is how the heck I got to where I am today, and the second is kind of some of the things I've learned along the way, not a ton. I'm not giving my eulogy yet. And then I am going to spend some time with my current employer. And one reason is because why I went there and why that makes sense. But also just kind of a quick piece on, because I know especially healthcare administration, many of the degrees that you're sitting and getting here come into it. And quite frankly, many of the Eastern graduates are part of the 682 employees that I call colleagues right here in Spokane. So believe it or not, we're one of the largest private employers in Spokane. And then we do have our headquarters just north of Seattle. Interesting enough, Patrick, we're no longer down the street on East Sprague. We sold our 130,000 square feet to another great local company in Dorian. So Dorian now owns our campus, which we'd been at for well over 50 years. We have a 93-year history here in the state of Washington, but we now are, of the last couple months, we are in the Wonder Building, and we're on the top floor of the Wonder Building, and we actually just had our open house maybe 2 days ago. So, I got to see out here, where the heck were you on May 18th, 1980? Lincoln, Nebraska. Who was not born by then? All right, good. You guys and my wife. But anyway, true statement. She was literally born 8 days before this. So does anybody know what this is? What is it? All right, believe it or not, I was going through some old trunks of my parents who have both passed away. Anybody? this is ash from that. So I put this because where was I in that May? It was my first job. I'm the youngest of 10 kids. My dad was a local pediatric dentist. So what did he do? He stripped out the seats in his 15-passenger Dodge club wagon that he had, or his wife had, and he went down. He had a longtime hospital dentist also grabbed all the surgical stuff that he could scrape up from Sacred Heart, masks, hoods, all this stuff. I mean, COVID before COVID. Remember, we actually wore masks back then too. And then he got these squeegees, and he put his kids all out because they thought the buildings were going to collapse because of the ash on the roofs. So what do? You put your 6-year-old out there pushing ash off the top of the, so I mean, I was on top of the Paulson building, the IMB building, which now, of course, is our friends at Inland. I spent the night in the funeral home out on Sullivan there because we had done the roof out there. And my dad always said it was the most money he'd ever made in 29 days in his life because there was no one else doing it. And so we did that. And that was the launch of something called CB Enterprises. Surprise, surprise, Condon Brothers Enterprises. So there's Condon Brothers Enterprises went into many other things. I also spent my childhood baling firewood for like 7-Elevens. You know how you can get the little one? You know, well, my dad decided, and my parents lived in this big old English Tudor house that no one wanted in 1969. It sat vacant for 3 years. So they bought it for $40,000. I don't know what it was, 8,000 square feet, and stuffed their 10 kids in there. But it also was his point of CB Enterprises. So we had big, semi-loads of firewood in the front yard, and we were baling it all up, sending it all over eastern Washington, North Idaho. The neighbors loved it, by the way, because it was kind of a fancy neighborhood. Well, the Condons weren't so fancy. But that was my first job, honestly, when I was about 6 or 7 years old. Quite soon after that, my dad started Santa's Tree Farm. One of my parents' dear friends were Jesse and Mert Rosar. Well, what did they have? They had all these parking lots. Well, what did they need at Christmas? They needed to sell Christmas trees. So my dad came up, and for about 45 years, up till just the wee last years of their lives, my parents were still running Santa's Tree Farm. And so at one time, they were the largest retail and wholesale Christmas tree business in eastern Washington and North Idaho. They had, 30 different stores they delivered to, 13 different Christmas tree lots. And so many times I spent, and of course their buddies were the Rosars, so we were in many of the Rosars parking lots. But my dad used to rent, get this, my dad, wonderful, he's passed away now, I shouldn't be talking this way about him, but I was like, what were you thinking, Dad? He would put his kids in, he'd rent these trailers, and we would sleep at the tree lots so that somebody wouldn't steal a Christmas tree. You put your 9 and 10-year-olds in and the best thing is he would drive around and he would drop off. The best part of it was Godfather's Pizza. So we worked for Godfather's Pizza, and he would drop those off, and he would grab the big bucket of money. Back then, of course, everybody bought it in cash, so it was all cash or maybe some checks, but mostly still, in the 80s, people were using cash. So literally, that was my second job, to the point of, and I was looking for it because I brought a few props like the ash. That's when I first learned how to, and my degree was in finance, but I did all the finance from probably 10 years old all the way, still when I was in college, and even when I was in the Army, and I would go, and my dad had the black book. So I would make a spreadsheet of all the sales per day, how many trees sold, what were the costs of goods sold, the whole thing before I even knew what costs of goods sold were. And then I'd go over to Kinko's, laminate it. So he had like 30 years of every day what sale it was for it. Never looked at the computer, but always went, where the hell's my black book, David? Are we doing are we doing all right? And even my parents in their late 70s were still doing this Christmas tree thing. It was crazy. That probably took me through high school. There was a little interrupt in there. CB Enterprises turned into Condon Brothers. I didn't put it on here, but I did for many summers. CB Enterprises turned it into Condon Brothers, which was a railroad construction and demolition company that 3 of my siblings ran. It was, I don't know why I didn't put it on here. Like I said, I can't keep a job. But before Coffee Brothers, so we built railroads. So, as you drive to Seattle and you saw the John Wayne Trail and all that, well, my family, or my brothers really, had the company that tore that all out. We also, during that time, all throughout eastern Washington, Montana, and Idaho, the railroads turned all their spurs. You had to take 100 cars, right? So a lot of the spurs weren't long enough. And so we spent a lot of our time in all these little communities where they used to have grain elevators, and basically 3 communities would decide, hey, the grain elevators are the best there. Let's extend the spur there till you can take 100 units. So we would extend a quarter mile, 3 mile, these little things. It actually was a simultaneous conglomeration IPO in 97, and so 3 of my siblings were the CEO, COO positions, and so anyway, but I never held a position like that. I was simply a laborer in those. Probably my biggest claim to fame, it was in high school. We got the contract to redo all the crossings of what's the mass transit down in Portland? The MAC, Mark? No, it's not the MAX. Well, whatever the crossings were in downtown and throughout the suburbs, they failed on them. So we had the contract to replace them. Well, that was a federal job. Well, my dad is a good Irish Catholic. Prevailing wage, if anybody was going to get prevailing wage, it was going to be his children. So we would fly down on Friday after getting out of Gonzaga Prep, because the work had to be done over the weekend because it was running. This was failed after, so we were doing the work after it was going. So we would work 24 hours a day from Friday evening, and then we would fly home like on Sunday night so that we could make school on Monday morning. So I had that little stint in there. So then I get to college. I'm like, I don't want to go home because, God, that works hard. So in my sophomore year, actually, I'm not, I've had like 5 jobs at Premera also. I'm not the vice president of marketing. He would shoot me if he said that. But it's interesting. I'll come back to that when I get to the final. But actually, I started a company. And this was actually my senior thesis. It started my junior year in a marketing class when I did a project. I found it in my files, waking up the coffee industry in eastern United States, opportunities. Because believe it or not, Starbucks was not in Boston. And so I'm sitting in Boston, going to Boston College, no Starbucks, no drive-thrus. They had a 13-store company called Coffee Connection. Now, they had coffee shops, absolutely, wonderful ones in the North End, but all independent, high-end, or whatever, good coffee shops. Then they had the infamous one, everybody knows that one, right? Dunkin' Donuts. Well, if anybody around here remembers Winchell's, Dunkin' Donuts is a disaster. But anyway, people love their Dunkin' Donuts in New England specifically. So anyway, I started Coffee Brothers my sophomore year. My brother, we actually went to Costco right up here, because we didn't have Costco also in Boston at that time. And so we went to Costco, and it was right up here, and then we drove out to Boyd Coffee Company and bought a espresso maker. And we drove his 350 Ford to Boston. And so we started 5 coffee shops. And then my senior year, I did basically how to expand that. So I did the business plan, was my senior thesis. And we did end up having 5 coffee shops. We were going gangbusters. It paid for a lot of things. I did Army ROTC, but otherwise it paid for my college, my brother, and we were acquired by McMahan. Basically, this is when I learned the rough truth of they bought us, they shut us down, they just wanted us the heck out. We had 5 different shops, so we were in Filing's basement. If you don't know Filing's basement, that was the precursor to the rack. So people trip over us on their way to Filing basement. We made money, But then we were in the Harvard Medical School and a few other spaces. But institutionals, like things like in places like this, we'd have a. But it did very well, And quite frankly, it bought my first car, So so that was that. Then I went into the United States Army. It is true, although I don't know if my colleagues at Premera would agree. That was where my amazing healthcare background came in. I was in the largest HMO in the world called the United States Military Medical System. But I started in the infantry there. and I was a medical platoon leader, 30 medics, a doc assigned to a 1,000-person infantry unit in Hawaii. I also was the aide to the commanding general of the Pacific for medical operations and the first two-star woman. So I sat alongside her, and she had about 8,000 people in her command. She also was the first CEO of TRICARE, which is in essence the insurance company backed by many private insurance companies. She was the first CEO of that, and so I had a window into that world. I'm actually going to have dinner with her next Sunday night in Fort Lauderdale. She lives about 3 miles from Walt Worthy, believe it or not, but I'll be down there for work, and I'm going to see them both. Got out of the Army, I came back to Spokane. I did 2 things, and I'll move on here in a second, but of all things, I was in the Army for, at that point, 6 years. I ended up being in the reserves for 3, but I became the captain of my Navy, and I worked for an investment group that had bought Foss Maritime on Coeur d'Alene, and we broke it into 3 companies, and one of them called North Idaho Marina, North Idaho Marine, and so we had 13 tugboats, and dispersed those on all the lakes of northern Idaho and went into dock building and moved it from what it had been. We used to move about 1 million board feet of lumber from St. Mary's up to Coeur d'Alene. And my maybe 3rd week on the job, I had my little little beautiful thing like this, and I went into the Stimson Lumber CEO. I had my little briefing book, and I showed him how we were going to increase his rates by 300%. And that was just slightly less expensive than him trucking it up 95. He asked me to leave his office, and I promptly did, and subsequently there was a group that purchased the whole lumber mill that was there. That company still is in existence. It's been sold twice. Then I did work in the dental industry, so another healthcare background. I did run my dad's dental practice, mostly to get it ready to sell. At that point, he had 35 employees, 7 dentists, 3 different locations, 2 operating rooms. It was a pretty going concern, so we sold that. Then I went into Congress. I worked in Congress for 7 years. I was a deputy chief of staff, and I ran our congresswoman's office here locally in Eastern Washington, and I also, back in the earmark days and some of the other policy areas, I was the one that orchestrated all of that, working with our 2 senators' offices. And we can come back to stories there. I think the best was, and it made the paper, I used to go to the State of the Union because you could, you're a staffer, you could go. And the one time I went, I sat next to Mr. Pelosi, and one problem was I got there and I found out the infamous, I brought 2 different shoes. So I was wearing 2 different, both black, but 2 different shoes. He had a good clap, but then he gave me good advice. He said, I've been going to these for 30 plus years. He goes, what you do is they know who's sitting in each seat. And at that point, the boss was the chair of her caucus. So his wife was the same. She actually, Mrs. Pelosi, was the head of the opposing. So we were sitting right next to each other. He goes, this is what you do. You just put your hands like this, because when the cameras come by, it either looks like you're just holding your hands or you're clapping if you're supposed to be clapping. But this way, you don't have to worry, because sometimes you're not supposed to be clapping, especially if you're clapping and your wife is not. And so he said, I just hold my hands like this. So that was, all the subsequent State of the Unions, I would just, took Pelosi's advice. I came back, I ran for mayor, and I'm happy to take questions there. We had a great run for 8 years just on the business side. People forget, but in 2012, the city had about $400,000 in the bank, and we were going bankrupt. I actually met with 3 bankruptcy attorneys, and they tried to convince me that I should take the city through bankruptcy. And at that point, we were pretty much could have very easily done that. We left with an over $1 billion operating budget, never increasing taxes, but with huge investments into the community. And there's a story behind how you can make that all happen. But one of the big stories is a great graduate and long-term employee of Eastern Washington University is the one that put that all together for me over and over and over again, Rick Romero. So he is a wonderful, both an alum of yours, executive of Eastern, and then also. I left there and I came to Premera, and at Premera I started as the Eastern Washington, kind of quite frankly, the front guy for Premera in Spokane at the time. We really wanted to increase our presence here. We had a big initiative called Rebalance, and part of it was rebalancing the workforce to Eastern Washington. So we have done that. We have gone up considerably in size, and interestingly enough, we also have increased our presence here on the sales side. I am now the vice president for our commercial business. So that's any company that has 2 employees up to 5,000. And whether it's in the state of Washington or we are in Alaska. So what have I learned over that big diatribe? You saw that it was not a traditional route. I really have put it into 3 categories. And I think whether I was talking about a soldier, I say here a customer. But you really have to, and it sounds trite, but it's interesting. You literally have to put yourself in the person of who you're serving. So I sit there and I think about my soldiers when I first started, right? What were my soldiers thinking? I mean, I was in Hawaii. Kids were from all over the country. Quite frankly, we even had kids that were immigrants still going through their naturalization process, and they would, they would come into the military as part of that. So really, but you had to put yourself in those shoes. On the flip side, also, they used to sit there and say, "Oh, you wouldn't get it, sir. You don't know where I'm coming from." I'm like, well, my parents wouldn't pay for my college either, and so I went into. People go, "Why'd you join the Army?" Flat up, I had to pay for college. There was no I had some big yearning. I had no clue what I was getting into. But my parents were at retirement age, and my dad's like, "We aren't paying for your school." They were wonderful. They invested in my K-12, all private school. But college-wise, you're on your own. So I got into the Army. But you really have to put yourself in that position and understand. And when I became mayor, it was the same thing. You can't have lived experience in every person's experience. So you have to, and it's not to feel sorry for someone. That's actually the wrong. That's putting it back on yourself. But you literally have to get into how are they going to look at this. And when I was mayor, I used to always use the ALICE. Anybody know what the ALICE is? There's 1 or 2 people. Asset limited, income constrained, but employed. And at the time, believe it or not, in Spokane, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but it'll give you the right idea. I want to say to live paycheck to paycheck for a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, I want to say it was somewhere around $65,000. Okay, high 50s. Okay, Patrick used to run my economic advisory committee, so he remembers this because I used to always bring back to empathy. I'd put how would this work for a person that was in the high 50s? That's now just over 6 figures or just under? Is it like 90 grand or something like that? Yeah, it's So I'm fundamentally nearly doubled in 6 years since I just left. I mean, you're just sitting there going, but that's what and my motto was to build the city of choice. And I literally said, people have a choice of where they want to live. So if we do this, will it cause a person making high 50,000s to live here or not? So if we raise utility rates, not. If we invest in parks, yes. If they invest in parks, how do we reduce their what they might spend on something else that they can now do something for free? That's why we decided to not charge for swimming. I mean, it was actually costing the city more to charge for swimming than it was not to charge for it. We couldn't even pay for the people that were taking the money, the auditors. We had huge audit findings because kids just bring their cash and throw it up there. Well, cash management procedures when you're talking with a kid that's, in high school that's trying to take the money. So we'd fail these state and we'd get fined like 30 grand and we were taking in 100 grand. And I'm like, so it was but you're putting yourself in those shoes. The second thing is you literally do have to educate. And that's that's what I mean, and not depending on what you're saying here, whether that's educate, literally education, or if it's in the case of in the commercial world that I work on, educate you what your choices are, what you have, and that seems reasonable. But then the real one that really scares everybody, and it definitely scares people in government, is you literally have to empower your citizens to make the choice. In the private sector, I've learned they just kind of already have it, so you just kind of have to deal with it. The market has the ability to decide where they want to go, but you really have to think in the sense of you've educate them to the level to where then they are empowered to make the choices, and they actually feel good about it. They have confidence in it. And I would suggest in healthcare, we have a ways to go. People kind of are like, oh, what do I do? They don't know what to do. It's complicated, and so they don't feel empowered. They don't feel confident when they're just like, well, I got to make a decision because open enrollment, go, and then 3 months in, they're like, oh, I hope I made the right decision, right? So to me, as I look at, and especially as we look at education and where we're going, and you're going to have your technical capabilities, but that's why I was an early adopter of loving where the university is going, of that lived experience. Because I think in today's world, I'm listening constantly to AI. I live in a highly technical fields, right? Underwriting, finance, actuarial, and we're using AI models in those, and it's just mind-blowing. So what is it that we bring to the table as business professionals or leaders? And to me, as I've worked through, as you can see, many different industries, many different ways to get here, they all kind of fall into these three areas. So that is, people say, what brought you to Premera? Well, these are actually, and I'll let you read these, but we are a not-for-profit health plan in Washington State. Not all, obviously health plans are not-for-profit. Not only that, but we literally do have a purpose. And so we spend a lot of time on how we do this. I often say we sell three things. Anybody guess what Premera sells? What do you think we sell? Insurance policies, yeah? What else do we sell? Technology, yeah? Actually, the vast majority of our employees are technology employees. Some of your cyber folks work for us. So basically, yes, we sell insurance, we sell risk, so that if you have something really go bad, that we are the ones that you hope you never use us, which people, that they get frustrated over that. The second thing, which we really use technology for, is we sell a health plan. What does that mean? We network together thousands of different providers, and we do that now predominantly through technology and your Premera Health Hub, and you look at where you can go, and if you have a certain thing, what's your opportunities and where you can choose from. And then the third thing is we sell financial transactions. In our case, you take your little blue card there, we've negotiated rates that are better than you could get on your own, and we process that for you. So we sell basically three different value streams. Predominantly in my part of the business, we sell it to companies that do that for them, their employees. The second is a mindset, and that's back to that, that empathy piece, so that, as you can see, it lines very well in why I came to Premera. And quite frankly, one of the big reasons I got to know Premera when I was mayor is because they came to the table over and over again to help me solve issues that the city was having. Overuse of emergency rooms, other big initiatives that we'd have in health equity or homelessness. We still are, I believe, maybe I'd love to be corrected, but I believe we're still the largest company that has donated to alleviate homelessness in Spokane. The Hope House, $1 million to Family Promise, other major investments in alleviating homelessness, the new Von Schott out at the crosswalk, the new crosswalk. So it's actually then ultimately gets to culture. And be honest, if you go to our workforce, it's amazing. We will retire a woman who's worked for MSC, then Premera, for 42 years here on April 15th. So it's just fascinating to be around people that have that commitment. And you hear it over and over again. It reminds me a lot of when I was in the military and the Army, that there is a family there. Or when I was at the city, same thing. People go and work for those for a long time. So I will spend the last few minutes in the issues around healthcare. And one of the key number one issues, obviously, is the cost of healthcare today, right? It is, if you look at anything from just looking at a graph, just even the CAGR, the cost since 2020, healthcare is the number one over everything else. Even some things from 2020 cost us less, like TVs and technology and phones actually have gone down. But healthcare is number one. But the breakdown of the dollar, the vast majority of it that you see goes to healthcare. So this is our big systems here, whether that be Multicare or Providence, whether it be inpatient or external. The other one that has really come up dramatically, even in the last 6 years, is pharmacy. That's the 20%. And then inpatient, the hospitals there at the end. The first is your doctor's offices and other professionals. So 16% then to the hospitals. And that's where you see these fully integrated systems, whether it be at Multicare or Providence or other fully integrated systems. They're in all of those, right? And some of those even own their own pharmacies. And so that is where you see it. The last two there is us at 7 cents. So that's where we do the staffing, the technology, the networks, the oversight. And then, of course, we also pay taxes. Considerable taxes, especially in this state. Even the new sales tax got to us on digital services. So those all get, that's the breakout. So you go, God, David, why are you in this industry? Well, people ask me the same thing of why I wanted to run for mayor. So I just want to touch on a couple things. And this is, you say, well, what are the avenues? And those of you that are in school here, what are the areas that you're going to look at? The first and foremost, we all know this, that 25% of healthcare is wasted on, you feel like you're getting the same test over again. And why are you getting that test again? Or why? And so actually 25% of that. And so in a big way, especially now with AI, technology will be a big piece of reducing that duplicative issues. The second is the provider shortages. Spokane is the worst county in the state for primary care per capita. This is why, and I'll show it to you in a second, we've made huge investments as a not-for-profit, locally headquartered. And that's why I championed our 2 medical schools here. And then it's not just that. You need the nurses. You need everything that Eastern does, the physical therapists and the dentist program and everything else. It's not, we talk about physicians, but it just keeps on, they can't do anything on themselves. So the reality is that's where we're at. The next is, obviously I commented on the drugs. One of the interesting things is, and we spend a lot of time doing this and looking at biosimilars that can have the same outcomes but are dramatically less expensive, some cases some 40% less. And then really the final is, and this is another huge use of technology, and that is getting the right care at the right time. And one of those key pieces is right when I came on board, I got to do another groundbreaking. We venture capitaled a company called Kinwell, and they're in primary care. And it was really to address 2 of these, which is we had the worst primary care in Spokane. So we actually piloted it here for 2 years, and now it's statewide. But we have a exclusive relationship with Kinwell, and it's an expanded healthcare, primary care approach where we're doing much more in that area. So as you look at what are the ways to deal with this, these are the 4 key areas that we're working on. But let me finish here, and that is really the ability for a company like Premera. And this is how not only are we, and why I came to Premera, not only do we provide, health insurance or a health plan or financial services, we invest back into our communities that we are, because we are not for profit, so we do not have stockholders. And so when we do have excess margin, in the last several years, it's gotten invested in 3 key areas: health equity, behavioral health and homelessness, and rural health care. And you can see just over the last several years, and ones that I would bring to mind, and I'll finish with this, is some key investments to really expand our capabilities, predominantly here in Eastern Washington. One is it's administered by University of Washington, but the issue that was really key was behavioral health. We will never have enough behavioral health specialists, and so the reality is we have to get our primary care doctors and primary care offices and nurses to realize they can do a lot of behavioral health. They kind of forgot about it. And so AIMS is a program administered through University of Washington, but statewide, to go back and do professional development for folks so that they can do that. The next is, it was a blast. I had breakfast with our first residents out of Yakima at the Pacific Northwest University, and so we underwrote 2 residencies there. University of Washington, we also have a big rural health initiative, obviously getting people to the higher level of capabilities. Same thing on the LPNs. And then, of course, at the Elson Floyd School, we have another couple residencies, and one not on here, which was fascinating. I just had dinner with them, is down in Pullman. We have 3 residencies that are at the Pullman Regional Hospital. So as you can see, as I finish with, it really is about the empathy and aligning yourself with whether that be your customer, or whether that be the soldier that's in front of you, or whether that be the citizens, giving them the tools and educating them so that they're empowered. And so over my, a couple decade career of not being able to keep a job for more than 7 years, I get a little worried. I'm at year 6 yesterday. And guess what? You know what today is? Anybody know what today is? 6 years ago, COVID was declared a worldwide pandemic. I started at Premera yesterday, 6 years ago. My first job 2 weeks from now, 6 years ago, meeting my, at the time, probably 400 employees, was handing them a box to say, take your computer home, I'll see you in 3 weeks. Well, that was 6 years ago. We just went back into the office last week. And I'll be honest with you, we made the strategic decision that those 682 people will not be coming back to the office. We went from 130,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet, or maybe even less, with about 100 people in the office. And our longevity has gone up even more. Our productivity is holding. There are key positions. We went very strategically of what are those 100 positions. But you think, so we just had a big open house. If you haven't been in the Wonder Building, they have that big food court sort of thing on the first floor. So it works out beautifully for us because we had our 600 employees be able to come in and have lunch and, and see the new offices that they will come to a couple times a year for a Christmas party or a summer party. But we made that strategic decision here because of the capabilities that we're able to bring just through what we've learned over the last 6 years. So that's the reality of where we're at. So, but it's pretty exciting. They're excited to be there. But it's back to empowering them to do their job where they are. And I'll tell you, you think about workforce equity. You think about the single parent that now can work from home, send their kids to school and go to the home office and then take a break in the afternoon when they get home. And that's, they just, not only the largest expense for many of these families is after school care and other things, they can literally be there. You think about, somebody up in Colville or so, now that Spokane footprint now goes, we had a big hiring event down in Yakima. We have 50 plus employees in the Tri-Cities. I forget what we have up in Colville, but now those are all dispersed throughout Eastern Washington, which really, to me, gets right back to these three things, because now I have employees that really know what the Tri-Cities, whether they work in networks or not, they're living in that community and influence our culture from that community, or the same thing in Yakima or other places that we literally have people living there that know what the reality is for healthcare, which is the number one issue people are concerned about. So anyway, that's the story. And I'm happy to take some questions.
So I hope some of that energy has rubbed off on you that you just heard from David on stage, because use that energy to think of good questions that you may have that he didn't quite cover, or maybe cover well enough to your satisfaction. And to get us started, we're going to have Professor Sue Nelson sort of prime the pump here with David with a couple of questions she's prepared. But think about what you might want to ask, and she'll call on you in the next half hour. So with that,
Yeah.
So
Professor
David,
Nelson.
thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey and your insights. I'm going to start us off with 2 questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, audience. And I see some familiar faces from my classrooms. And I think you might know I might point at you. In fact, I'm looking at one of you right now. So just be prepared, okay? Because I'm prepared as well. So I'm going to ask
Zoe, do you have a question? No.
So I'll ask one question about your time as mayor and one around healthcare. Does that sound good to you?
Great.
Okay, excellent. So you described you're taking a non-traditional path built by experience and leadership. Looking back, what experiences most shaped your leadership style when you were serving as mayor?
I learned, well, you saw a lot of it. A lot of it has to do with how you grow up and the foundation, just that grit and what my parents, so I would say definitely, growing up in that family was a huge cornerstone. Professionally, my first job outside of working for myself, whether I started Coffee Brothers at 21 or or working for family businesses, was the United States Army. And I'll tell you what it really gave me the strength for, especially when I became mayor, is leading people that are smarter than me, that quite frankly outrank me, that are older than me. I was 37 or 36, 37 when I was mayor, and Spokane, the city government of Spokane is one of the largest law firms. It's one of the largest engineering firms. So you have a lot of postgraduate folks that sit in those seats. So, and I'm sitting there with my, BS in finance, and with much of the community that didn't think some 37-year-old should be, running the city, and you're taking over a corporation that is literally on the brink of bankruptcy. So I would suggest, that was another strength of being able to feel, comfortable. I'll be real frank, and I laid off 42 people on day one. And you want to know what that looks like? It looks like you're getting sworn in at the clock tower at noon, and at 8 o'clock every half an hour, someone was given the opportunity to walk in, and they wouldn't let me into City Hall. But somebody let me into the council chambers, and that means you're sitting in an office in the anteroom of the chambers, and people that had a career at the city, I was asking them not to serve in my administration, and that means that the night before you're throwing up because you can't believe you're about to go do that, and you have an Excel spreadsheet and you haven't ever met any of these people. Maybe you did one or two of them, but not really. I had no exposure to the city government. I was working in the federal government, so I knew some of the players, but not many. And so, but you have the confidence that you're doing the right thing. It wouldn't be the first time that when I was in the Army, I had to do the same thing, not to that magnitude by any means, but to command, in the Army, I had doctors. They were, colonels, and I was a captain. And I, used to infamously say, "Don't confuse my authority with my rank, sir. You will take a PT test, and you will lose 30 pounds, and you will, qualify on your weapon, because you'll be a hold back to our soldiers if they have to take care of you because you didn't know how to use your weapon." So it gave me that strength, but that doesn't mean that it's, a strength that doesn't have a lot of pain and agony along the way. But it also, I think, the first one, maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but the real reality of empathy when I was in the military, that really then transported, and I had a great, like I said, you don't have lived experience in everybody that you lead, right? Or in the, and you just can't. You can't pretend that, I had a great background. I was a private school kid. I mean, let's be honest. I was not the traditional, family here that lives in Spokane, in different parts of Spokane, and same thing in the military. I'd come from a top-tier university, and I had to send one of my soldiers to prison. And in the military system, the commander is the judge. They've changed that slightly in the last 10 years, but it had been the rule for a couple hundred years. Now, again, in this case, it was nearly a capital case, so they bring in a judge that actually knows what they're doing, that works on your behalf, that you sit next to the judge while they administer but you ultimately do it. And the empathy I had was for the convicted, and here's a war hero that made some bad decisions that you could yourself see making, quite frankly, but we at the same time were sending him to prison for a significant amount of time, and that's weighed on me for years. And so as you sit there and be able to do that, because quite frankly, in city government, you don't send people to prison, but you definitely are in charge of the police department, and the criminal activity, but you can see where people might get themselves into a position like that. Not that they shouldn't be held accountable, but so I probably more and more the policy side I had down. I had worked in Congress. I knew how it worked or didn't work, and that sort of thing. But it's the people leadership, I think, is the key.
Excellent, thank you. I heard you say a lot there. I heard you say accountability and then empathy. And when you were giving your example of being a captain and working with colonels, you were being accountable to others through them, right? And asking them to be accountable to others. And then as part of your city government, you were being accountable to others by making tough decisions. That's what I heard you say. Does that sound right?
Much better said. Well-educated professor, yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
I never have gone back and gotten any postgraduate schooling. I always think I should, but I never have. So I've given enough commencement dresses now. I'm like, isn't that good enough? I've been at graduations, I was your commencement speaker one year, so yeah.
So let's ask a question about healthcare in our particular region. So for communities in Eastern Washington and the Inland Northwest as a whole, what opportunities do you see for strengthening healthcare access and workforce development over the next decade?
You know, this is super exciting, and I think especially as we sit on this campus, I think there's a couple, we really do have to look at the access and the affordability and what is driving, those costs. And those are two, and so I think some of the big opportunities we have here is we actually all know each other, the presidents of the universities, the deans. If they don't know, they should, meaning that, you get busy in your own life, but you literally, and we need to create that environment so that they can come together to do that. I also think the interdisciplinary work is going to be fascinating. And I think one huge opportunity, and I know you guys have the cybersecurity now always nationally recognized, now nationally certified. You probably have this, and I'm just not up to speed on it. I happened to visit the AI Institute over at Gonzaga. I'm sure you guys probably have one too. So as we sit there and we look at these centers of excellence, I think the future of personalized healthcare is going to be through AI and it will be very personalized. Many of you guys knew Leroy Hood and the idea of P4 medicine. The reality is AI is going to take that to another level of really having personalized medicine. Everything from, we have these, the capabilities on pharmaceuticals, and not only pharmaceuticals dealing with a disease, but the preventive pharmaceuticals and the gene therapies, and being able to target that gene therapy to you personally. Right now, trials are done on the bell curve. The one that comes to market is the one that does the most for the most people. But if you're out here, and you're on the regimen, you're going to start up here. The other variations of those drugs are out here. It might be super successful, but unfortunately, you're the one out here on the other end of the bell curve, and they've got you on a regimen that's up here that takes you, whatever months to find out you're not on the right one. But there's a day where AI then allows you to be on this one over here because we can produce that and actually put it directly for you. So I think there's real opportunities that we, can enhance healthcare, and we're a powerhouse. We produce, twice as many physicians here than in Seattle. To me, we need to hold ourselves accountable to get the residencies here, and unfortunately, shame on us if we don't, because that capacity is going to leave our region if we don't. So we have some. I'd love to see a lot more. And I think we have the opportunity to have them in areas that we will be the leaders. Those get filled. They have match day. It's not like those go unfilled. So I think we really have some great opportunities there. The last thing I'll say, and it's this interesting. It's not fun to talk about, but I know the universities wake up and think about this as just, who's going to post high school, and this is a problem. And definitely in healthcare and healthcare workforce, we need people to have post-high school certifications, yes, degrees and graduate degrees and doctoral degrees, but we need all the above, and we need to double down, and we did several years ago, maybe a decade ago, just on dropout rates in high school. We need now to take that same effort we did then when we brought it down double digits and put it into what is post-high school for you. And again, I'll put a plug for the Polytech. The years of checking out of life for 4 years and getting a degree and hoping that you get a job is not reality. It is go for a year and a half, get a certificate, get a job, that pays, and then, then maybe get another one, and then another. I think there'll be a transition period for 10 years or more that we equate a stackable credential to a BS. I think we won't even be talking about BSs and BAs in 10 to 15 years. I really don't. We'll do it so that we all kind of, in our heads, oh, that's equivalent to a BS. No, you're going to look at, go to LinkedIn. People don't, they put their school, but then they immediately put what are their qualifications, and, and this has been normal in a lot of other fields. We have CPAs. Where did you go to school? Did you pass the CPA? If you're an engineer, did you pass the whatever the different levels of an engineer? If you're a nurse, did you, so we do this, but we've never equated it to other fields, or perhaps not necessarily in the traditional 4-year period. So I think if we're on the forefront of that, and quite frankly, I think Eastern is, I think we're going to be better for it. And when you really talk about workforce, because we don't have enough kids, the birth rate isn't there, so we're going to have to go to people that are 30 and say, hey, you seem to have, back to kind of my 3 things, but what are the technical things you have that we can pivot? Look at me. I mean, I had no business being one of the vice presidents at Premera Blue Cross. I mean, I appreciate Patrick saying I had a background in healthcare. I mean, 20 years previously, and now I'm looking at deviations from the mean on but how do you lead those groups? And if you listen to any of the podcasts right now about AI and what you can bring to the workforce, I'll tell you, its network is number one. I mean, I was listening this morning to VOK, value of knowledge, and unfortunately, the value of knowledge is way down because knowledge is available to everybody. I mean, that's an overstatement, but the reality is, what are those EQ sort of pieces you bring to the table?
Excellent, thank you. Do you mind if I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure. Do I have
So
a
regarding-
choice? Can I storm off stage? If not, or no?
You could. Regarding AI in healthcare, for anybody who might be feeling uncertain or even wary, I would say, about AI in healthcare, do you foresee AI in whatever its form being the one delivering the healthcare solutions to the patients, or do you still
No,
foresee that being the person?
Yeah.
They're just using IA to better understand
I
how
mean,
to
just
deliver.
think about it. I sit there and think about the healthcare that let's just say in a rural clinic, right? Those doctors and the providers and the mid professionals, they're just trying to get through everybody, right? But when you're sitting there now looking at using AI, I mean, just think about it. You think about we have a in our startup community here in the lab, in the lab space, right? You think about all the digitized lab. Now you can look at somebody's digitized lab from birth to where they are right now. You can then overlay that with AI, that anybody that also has something similar or the same, what is their prognosis? I mean, literally, we are at the cusp of being able to do that. Now, to me, it's going to be how do you deliver that? Quite frankly, emotionally, one. So the EQ of your professionals and your healthcare needs to be dramatically higher. But you just look at what you're going to be able to do with just that alone, that one piece of looking, and then insert a gene therapy where you can then fix whatever the aneurysm was caused by, or fill in the blank. So I think there's just huge opportunities. But at the end of the day, I always say this, everybody gets real mad, like, why does it have to be so complicated? And I'm like, the human is the most complicated species on Earth. To think taking care of the human is not going to be complicated. I mean, people are willing to have more complication on how to buy their TV than they are willing to deal with their own health care. And so I push back some. Don't get me wrong. We have a huge piece in this as a health plan. We need to make it simple and easy. It's part of our mantra. I'm not suggesting that. And we need to bring that and, quite frankly, use some of these tools. But at the same time, I don't want simplicity to then trump what we're able to do with innovation. Because, people quickly go to, I'm vehemently against, we could have this debate, the government taking over healthcare. Well, that would make it easier. We would just have one payer. Everybody would work for the same paycheck. Okay, and I'll have this argument with with General Adams next Sunday night. She's a person that believes that. And she was the insurance company, the CEO of the insurance company. She was the hospital CEO of Triple Army Medical Center, and she was the employer of everybody that either worked at the hospital or all the patients that came to the hospital. She was it. And she was quite comfortable making decisions, having all three roles. And to me, you will not get the innovation that we need. You will not get the personalized care that we need. And frankly, don't get me wrong, we do need to make substantial and systemic changes. But this idea of we must go to something that's simple and easy to understand as the answer. Well, why do we have different universities? Why do we, why, fill in the blank. Why is it that this is the one? And and again, this is an opinion that has maybe perhaps bias to it, and we'd have a lively debate. But some of the reasons that David Condon believes that you saw a dramatic increase in the cost of healthcare over the last decade was a dramatic increase in government involvement in healthcare. And again, that's, and we could have this debate, and it would be a good one to have, and I should be challenged on statements like that, and we should be regulated. I am not suggesting we shouldn't. But as you look at it just as factual, in graphical representation, you can see where some of these things have included that, and where we are. So that being said, I think there's a lot of opportunity. People that are in the different fields. Quite frankly, healthcare has absolutely every field. There isn't a field that's not in healthcare. It's a lot more than just although it centers on the patient. The reality is the infrastructure is substantial, and quite frankly, like I said, if it's the most complex, species, it probably is going to be complex. We also talk about we spend the most money. Well, then don't. We're a free society. Don't spend the money. For some reason in our society, we value, this so much that we're willing to put that amount of money in there. Then don't. It's a simple, no one's forcing you to, so you sit there, you look at it, and you're just like, some of these things are self-fulfilling in a free capitalist society that we have, and we apparently value health at a very high level. And, you have these comments all the time. People, say this about Americans all the time, and whether it's good or not, and, but that's where we are. And so to me, I get excited just the operational aspects of it and the human aspect of it.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, audience, it is now your turn. Do we have any immediate questions?
I almost filibustered long enough. We have like 2 minutes. This is great.
For the students in the room, some of you must have some questions or could have some questions around leadership, community, public service. This would be an excellent time to ask those questions.
I'm curious, you shared a little bit about what to expect in the next 10, 15 years in the community and innovation education. I'm curious, for leaders that will be taking leadership roles in the next 10, 15 years, what do you see needs to grow to change in leadership? Like as people are seeking opportunities over the next decade, how would they be prepared for the companies, the communities of the future?
Obviously I grappled with this for 8 years of my life. Of what attracts, quite frankly, people to stay here. That was my main objective, was I want yes, we can recruit all you want, but, I was sent the other day the migration patterns of the United States last year, and it's an interesting graphic, to say the least. I often used to say I didn't really care about the state border. I cared about Havana, Francis, and I cared about people moving to the valley or north of Francis, and yes, I cared about Idaho, but no, I really didn't. I cared about making the city, and I think as you look at where people are choosing and people do have a choice, especially now more than ever. I would not have my job today. Frankly, my predecessor moved to Seattle 10 years before I had this job. Just corporately, this wouldn't have been a possibility. And so now people even have a bigger choice. And quite frankly, COVID showed us as a huge influence. So we had the right mix, right? You saw a big influx because of that. And people brought their jobs with them. And frankly, that's what you want. In essence, my job now should be over there. I brought my job with me, in essence, in this case, if you just looked at it really. And that's what we want, so to me, it's, as you look at leaders, it is a lifestyle sales pitch. It's not your typical, why do people want to be here? And that's why just recently, I championed our schools and parks levy and bond, because quite frankly, I was looking at Alice. I was looking at where people spent their money, and one of the big pieces of that for the City of Spokane was that universal pre-K, and now there's even more things talking about space for daycares. And so as I looked at somebody spending $1,100 on daycare, and now they were going to be able to, universal pre-K, be able to take their kid to pre-K if they chose to. I mean, now all of a sudden, as I made the value prop of spend your money here, spend you here, I'm offering you something. Or when you look at the new entertainment opportunities or recreational opportunities that they might be using, if you look at the Alice, they have this little budget for basically recreation and fun, if they have a little bit of it. And I was like, well, if I'm going to take money out of that, what are the things that we're offering? And quite frankly, I challenged, both the directors, the superintendent and the parks director, to say, I'll help you do this. I met with them for a year and a half every Friday morning, but it didn't mean I was going to politically support it unless you could go back and do that. And to me, to leaders, what speaks is if there's a value out there, people will support it. That polled very horribly. I'll tell you, when they did the first poll, I was like, David, why the hell did you get yourself involved in this? And I looked at Marcus Vercelli, I was like, really? What are we doing here? This is ridiculous. But, as the value proposition got out there for folks, you could see what was going to happen. So I would push leaders to, one, work together. That's what that's about, break down. I mean, people don't care. Havana, I used to have people, thanks for being my mayor. And I'm like, well, you live, in south of 57th. Oh, no, but you're my mayor. No, you're not, And, well, I voted for you. And I'm like, oh, don't, But, and then the only thing that I'd finally get them was I'd have to ask them what color their garbage can was. And ours were brown and Waste Management's were gray. And they're like, it's gray, just like yours. I'm like, nope. You don't live in the city. So, the reality is, as we do this, we've got to look outside the traditional boundaries. We got to come together. The resources are constrained, and so our leaders need to do that. And quite frankly, focus on, in a larger part, the quality of life of folks, and whether that be recreation or daycare or schools. Number one reason why somebody buys their house is a school. I learned that at Harvard. Quite frankly, I went to this 1 week course, and I remember that hit home to me, and that's when I found out that up in New England, where I went to school, the mayors run the school districts, either directly, meaning they appoint the superintendent, like the police chief and the fire chief, or like we run the parks department, they appoint the board of the school district, and then they hire, but they have a pretty direct involvement. And in a lot of ways, I think, I'm not, here to advocate for this, but it really then starts connecting it. This is where you hear then the city buses are the school buses. There's all kinds of things. The schools become, community centers, because when you're in one corporation, it's easier to do that type of stuff. I mean, we did it 10 years ago with the schools here. We handed over millions of dollars of property to the school district. And I almost got sued by some of the other folks, because they said that I was transferring assets of the city corporation to the school corporation. And so I was about to get sued to do that, and our value proposition was, but the stockholder is the same person. They own both companies. But I had, and we had knockout, drag-out fights with even some of my cabinet members, because they saw that, well, Mayor, you could get this money and we could reinvest it in our own capital. Why are you giving it to them? And that's when it's good to have 51% of the vote when you're mayor. So said, I appreciate your feedback, but the citizens own us both, so they're just changing their balance sheet where they want their asset, right? So they want it over in this part of their, so let's just put it over there. But yeah, most of those schools, it's the first. There's a lot of, people don't realize we have, but, I'll finish with this, and but, Shadle Park is park property. So Shadle Park High School is leased from the Parks Department. Also on that block is the utility department. People take their family photos and senior pictures in front of a water tank, the big, and then not only that, there's a library there, and then there actually is a park there. But literally no fences. The lawn all gets mowed. No one knows where the property line is. And I said, let's just do a bunch of those. But those of you that are lawyers know that is literally nearly impossible. But so we'd read it. The second time we did that was down here at Liberty Park. So did the same thing. But I said, lawyers go make it all legal, but this is ridiculous. But that one was done by accident. Not only that, but the street department was getting payments, because you realize there's streets that should have been on the grid underneath there. So the street department gets a say, and you're just like, what? How many people going into finance? Accounting? A bunch of accountants, nice. Marketing? Any marketing? A couple? All right, awesome. What else am I forgetting? Computer science? Is that IT? Oh, all right.
What are you looking for in employees that you would bring on to Premera, perhaps from Eastern?
Well, like I said, I am a big believer in education, don't get me wrong. I think, there is some, to me, especially now, it's the, I have a lot of technical fields, so there is some technical qualifications, but we quickly go to the qualifications. I mean, right now, those are delivered predominantly through a 4-year degree. So, but if it wasn't, I wouldn't necessarily look at where it was achieved, but do they have the certifications? And like I said, that now is traditionally still delivered over a 4-year model. So that's one. Number two, especially, it's a big challenge of mine. I just spoke at a lunch and learn for our company. A lot of my leadership was all based on presence, right? You're like this, right? I was in the Army. I stood in front of 30 soldiers. I'm in the city, the television cameras, it's all presence. Well, now with the dispersed workforce, and dispersed and diverse, and not only diverse ethically, which is also very true, but diverse from across the country. We used to be in maybe like 3 states when I started 6 years ago. We're now in 27. And so how you deliver that, I think, is, so how does somebody deal with that? We have a lot of motivational interview questions that our employee experience team, that are really smart on this stuff to help you, coach you how to interview, because it's a different interview than I was used to, We're hiring for very senior positions, and up till the very end, it's over this, right? And so you've got to be able to, and then quite frankly, and you're like, oh, but they'll be in person. No, the rest of your career will be with that person this way. So interviewing them over a screen is how you're going to probably work with them at least 80% of the time. I spend several days a month in Seattle, but a couple weeks, basically. But that being said, so I look for how to communicate, disperse, how are they going to lead. I predominantly hire leaders, of other, organizations, so you can see how they're going to lead and manage. And then with the building blocks of certain technical capabilities. And so, you think finance and technology and accounting, those sort of technical pieces.
Okay, time for one last question. Oh, excellent.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but why is it that Premera reimburses differently for the exact same service depending on which hospital you're using?
It's because of what we've been able to negotiate with that hospital. We obviously sit down and negotiate with the hospitals or other service providers, and it's a negotiation. And quite frankly, in the aggregate, often the systems will want different reimbursements in different parts of their organizations for different reasons. They're paying a provider more because when they recruited that provider, demanded a higher, and so they want to make sure, so they may, even in their own system, whether it be here in Spokane or that same procedure somewhere else in their system, may get a different price. The reimbursements, this is an infamous thing. Do we have any of my friends from Multicare or Providence here? One of their big issues is why aren't we getting paid the same thing that, the same service is on the west side? And many times the corporations decide where they're going to allocate those resources. I don't do our negotiations, but the reality is, it's a negotiation where they want that, where they need that, where we're willing to pay it, where we might have other options. So if we have a better rate, we will offer a product to our members. Because we're able to get a different price somewhere else. And in other places, we don't have that other option. We can't do that same service. So then we have to pay more in that location versus another. You know, there's thousands of codes, and so as you look at what that is, that's what our team is looking at. And quite frankly, it's a two-way street. Sometimes they say, this is what we want here, take it or leave it, and sometimes we don't have an option, and so we have to take it, and it ends up being higher than, you know, another. There isn't a set fee. So that's why, you know, and this is where I think the place we have when I sit there and say, you know, what should we pay on? I mean, somewhat, you know, facetious about, you know, what if we, you know, so we pay the most. Well, we're making those decisions, and you said, well, really, I'd rather pay less. Amen. I'm with you, and that's our job. But not only that, but you know, we now with AI, and you can go onto your Premera Health app now, and we actually classify our high-performing physicians, and we just started doing that. And that comes with a lot of consternation with the healthcare system, because doctors want to know, why do they not have a star next to their name? And we can show them the data that for outcome and cost, we can star this one. And so we use data from across the United States, the Blue system, and that's just rolling out as we speak. But here we are in 2026 with that level of detail. We used to be able to do it by system. We couldn't do it by actual provider. We now can do it by provider. So I can now go on to my physician finder on my Premera Health app and choose. These are the doctors that live near me, that, you know, and this is the ratings they get, and this is, you know, an estimate of what the charge would be out of pocket based on, because it ingests the plan that your employer has decided to pay for. So it knows this plan versus that plan, so depending on what your deductibles are and things like that. There isn't a master charge list out there, and like I said, the different systems don't want that. Yeah.
All right, well, there'll be time for more Q&A, and I think you'll be available
Sure, yep.
for the next few minutes, David, to stick around, and those of you who just want to come up here and talk to him after we're formally done, please do so. That typically happens. So can we give former mayor and now Premera David Condon a big eagle round of applause? Thank you for coming over and sharing these insights, David, and thank you, Professor Nelson, for your questions. The talk will be available on the Business School YouTube channel within 5 days, a week. For those of you who want to check back if you have any questions about what was actually said. So now's the time for networking and mingling. And for those of you who did do this, don't forget, if I can pull this out of here, you have a business card you can share with somebody in the room. So thank you, Lorna, for getting that up and running. And before we adjourn, I just wanted to point out that on your seats there's a little flyer, a tiny flyer about our remaining talks this spring. In April, we're going to have Irv Zackheim, who has had a fabulous run as an entrepreneur with Zack Designs on the West Plains, and he's agreed to come on the 14th of April, so mark your calendars for that. And then on late May 21, we're having a startup, well, roughly a startup. They've been in business for a while, that was founded by a couple students at University of Idaho who are not much older than you. And they've had a wonderful start to their business. They're based in Post Falls. So that is known as Safeguard Equipment Systems. So mark your calendars if you can come. And we'd love to have you one more time at our speaker series. So with that, again, David, thank you very much. We have something for him, a little plaque, and we got a picture coming up for participating in that. And now, everyone, enjoy the mingle time. We'll see you in a month.